starting the live streaming. I'll start with the karakia and then go into our normal process from there. So we're in a whole new world. E oku rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. We acknowledge that there is strength beyond ourselves when we work together to serve others. May we put aside our own personal interests, work with integrity and openness, striving to create a community that supports its people and the environment. Let us, in a moment of quiet, focus on why we are here. We give thanks for the wisdom of the past, look for opportunities in the present, and accept the challenges of the future. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa. Kia pai te haere. Welcome everybody to our first Zoom Council meeting. And I would, of course, just like to advise that the meeting is being recorded for administrative purposes and is also being live streamed so that all of our community who are out in their bubbles can join us should they wish to. Moving into our agenda, we have no apologies, so we have everybody here Zooming in with us. Welcome. This will be an interesting first time holding a full council meeting in this virtual environment. So bear with us if there's any technical glitches. We're hoping it will go as smoothly as possible. Are there any conflicts of interest? No. Excellent. And we have nobody presenting to us in the public forum today. And announcements by the Mayor. I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge, of course, the very different world that we are all living in at the moment, and say to our community, well done for doing everything that you have been doing to ensure that we can hopefully move forward out of lockdown level 4 as soon as possible. I think it's interesting times for us all, and Council is certainly doing everything that we can to support you both throughout this lockdown period and start preparing for the move into level 3 when that happens. So it's really just wanting to take an opportunity to thank everybody for all their efforts and everything that they're doing to get us through the next few weeks. Now, announcements by management today. We do have 2 updates being given to us with regards directly to our response to COVID-19. And the first one of that is I would like to invite Natasha Mackey, who is going to provide an update on our welfare response.
Kia ora koutou through the Mayor. So Napier has developed a welfare response plan in response to the pandemic and level 4 lockdown. Our response does link with the regional civil defence response, and we, along with other TLAs in Hawke's Bay, have initiated this local welfare response to deal with the needs of our community that are best met locally, utilising our existing networks and resources, and therefore allowing the group welfare response through the regional civil defence to plan and coordinate it for the growing demand and volumes of requests that are likely to start coming through. Our main aim is that no one falls through the gaps, and between all of us, we are hoping that we achieve that. We are taking a threefold approach where we're working with and supporting agencies and groups who are already providing support, and I must say they certainly have stepped up to respond to the needs of our community really well. We're also referring to the groups that can help and tapping into our networks and partners to do that. And finally, we're filling the gaps where needed, and we're doing that through a triage approach. So we're accepting requests from anywhere, And that includes our own customer services, Facebook, agencies, and just things that we might hear about. We then will determine the need and the urgency of the requirement to meet that need, and we'll resolve what we can through our own resources and services. And often that we are responding where there's a real urgency, or it's a simple thing that we can do. And then finally we will refer to others, and we're taking the approach that there's no wrong door. So if people are coming to us where they perhaps should be going to another agency, we don't worry about that. We're just picking that up and making sure that the person is able to access the resources that they need. We're also working proactively. So we're doing our own welfare checks. So as you know, we have community housing, and we have checked on all of our tenants to make sure that they're okay. And we're also part of a national response in terms of doing outbound calls to people who are over 70, and particularly who are living alone. And so our team, of which there's 18 people in our team at the moment and growing, and I'd just like to acknowledge that we have 3 counsellors doing those outbound calls, who are well trained and on the ball. And basically we're checking to see whether people are going to be able to see themselves through, and if not, referring to where they can get some help. We also are tapping into our existing network, and we're focusing particularly around vulnerable groups. So we've identified several of those which are quite specific to this pandemic. So the over 70s, people living with a health issue, rangatahi, also our homeless population, which I'm really pleased to say through the agencies that we've been working with are getting access to emergency accommodation and basic needs being met. We're also working with our support agencies and making sure that they have what they need to do their job, and also linking in with any community-led responses that are happening out in the community. And also, finally, we're also linking with the group welfare team and their network of networks as well. I'll just show you a couple of diagrams if this will work. Just bear with me. And you'll get a bit of just a moment. Share the screen. Can everybody see?
Push share.
Oh, push share. Right. Did that work? Did everybody see? Can everyone see the screen here? So this is really just our structure. So we in the welfare space have 3 teams. The housing team, who are our business as usual team, who are working on making sure our tenants are okay right through the level 4. And our outbound calling team, which I mentioned before, of which we have some of our housing team plus additional callers, and they're staff from other areas of council and some councillors, and backed up by our customer services team, who are also doing welfare checks in between receiving their normal calls. And finally, the welfare team, so that there's a team of 2 at this stage, myself and Emma Morgan, who are dealing with those local response requests that are coming in. And we are part of the incident management team, which is operating from Napier. And we also link in up here with the welfare team in the group structure, which is that regional structure. Right, I think I need to unshare that somehow.
Oh, stop share up the top.
Stop share. Oh, right, okay. Bear with. Right. So I'll also just show you another screen. Yeah, right, share screen. And that is not here. Okay, So we won't do that one.
It's not there.
I don't know. I'll just try something else. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is just a diagram really of how it all works. And you can see that there are a number of organisations over here to the left that are providing their own response. And we are also, through our welfare checks and our requests, responding to needs. We're linking into with the Te Hei Māori Order network, which has been set up by the DHB and Māori providers to specifically work with whānau. So we have a link with the Napier Ahuriri Hub, who are supplying food parcels out to whānau as well. So we've been supporting them in a small way, but linking in and making sure that we're liaising so that we can provide the support that they might need to do their job. And then again, linking in with that group welfare, which is the pink boxes, that's that regional response. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any, but just wanted to let you all know that we're working really hard to make sure the needs of our community have been met through this time.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I've raised my hand.
Great, great, Maxine.
Okay, thank you very much, Natasha. Just for the sake of the public who are watching this, could you explain some of those EOC, GECC, some of those abbreviations that we should know, but the public may not have heard before? Thanks.
Through there. So it is a jargon city, the whole civil defence function. So the EOC is the Emergency Operations Centre.
It's a physical space where we work.
And it's basically that where the IMT, the Incident Management Team, work from. And at the moment, that's a combination of virtual and physical.
We're in our own bubble.
And we have our own, by the way. We are... The GECC is the Group Emergency Coordination Centre, and that's the centre that's out in Hastings. And again, a lot of their team are working from home virtually, with around about 8 people in that centre, so they can maintain their physical separation as well. Was there another one that you wanted me to?
I just thought also those great. NDAG and YCON, just for the members of the public who don't know what those are. That second slide. Thanks.
Sure. So NDAG is the Napier Disability Advisory Group. Just to mention, one of the things that we identified early on in terms of vulnerable group were the deaf community. There's a lot of information being provided through videos, etc., that are accessible to the deaf community. So we've managed to do some of the messaging, the local messaging in particular, and Kirsten's Marewa's videos in New Zealand Sign Language for our deaf community. So it's tapping into our networks to be able to make sure that our community receive the information and support they need. The YCON is the Youth Council.
Thanks, Natasha. Were there any other questions? Okay, great. Well, the second part of the management announcements today will be to provide an update for the community on the work we're doing for a recovery support program. And we've got a working group focusing on this, and it really is about informing Napier businesses of the support mechanisms and ensuring that they're ready to take charge when we move out of level 4. So we're working closely with Business Hawke's Bay to provide information and advise how best to manage small to medium sized businesses through the various government levels. And I'm really wanting to urge and encourage business owners to not leave it too late to seek advice and help. It's really vital that business owners prepare and plan early as this will help to make a huge difference to the resilience of our local economy and assist with our ability to bounce back after the pandemic is over. Now, our support program aims to complement central government initiatives, of which there are quite a number. This includes the wage subsidy scheme, mortgage holidays, and the business finance guarantee scheme. And there's a really great resource on the Business Hub response webpage, which I'll be posting links to on my Facebook page. We're also in the process of building a page on our own Napier City Council website, which will be focused on our recovery plan and also include all the links through to the other resources that are available. So our plan includes a range of actions, including a targeted relief package, review of our capital works program, local shovel-ready projects, access to funding and advocacy in order to minimise roadblocks and assist businesses to make the most of the opportunities that are available to them. And it's we're working on this at a regional level alongside our other local councils, but obviously our primary focus really is the potential impact on Napier families as we transition into a new city vision, and so our first priority is absolutely on our local economy. Without a doubt, the COVID-19 lockdown has created an uncertain environment for businesses and individuals worldwide, and our plan considers the wider environment with those strong links to the national and regional planning. We're intending to have the first stage of our recovery plan released before the lift of the Alert Level 4. Now, none of us really are sure what the Napier economy will look like post-COVID-19. However, our plan will include feedback from local businesses. We are looking and analysing economic data and scenarios as they become available, and we really are doing everything we can to see our city recover as best as possible. I think, as I've got on my backdrop behind us, we're all in this together, and we all need to be planning how we can best move out of level 4 and how we can best set ourselves up as individuals and businesses to get the best possible scenario to move forward. And we're here to support you through that process and guide you to all the resources that are available. And I would like to invite Catherine Rayburn now, who is going to talk through a visual diagram of sort of the framework around our recovery plan. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'll just share the screen. Bear with me one moment. So good morning, everybody. As the Mayor mentioned, it is important for everyone to be making a plan as we look towards leaving Alert Level 4 and moving into Alert Level 3. And so we're, in addition to all of the response work happening at Napier City Council, also really looking forward to the recovery stage post the lockdown. We're not the only ones that are looking at this. Obviously, Napier City sits within a broader context. And as the Mayor mentioned, there is the Regional Economic Recovery Program happening at the regional level, and we are working with that. The Regional Economic Recovery Program is really focused on ensuring that as Hawke's Bay, we have a regional approach to seeking government funding for regional infrastructure projects. Also on the evolution of Matariki Reds, which is our regional economic development strategy that we already have in place, but looking at how that will need to evolve as in response to the COVID-19. And also at that regional level, looking at shared communications where that is relevant. So that's what's going on at that level. But at Napier City, for the recovery plan, we are really focused on the Napier community-specific requirements. Obviously, we've got an economy that's quite reliant on tourism, which is one of the hardest hit sectors as a result of both COVID-19 more broadly and the current lockdown and travel restrictions. So we're very conscious of that and looking at what are the real issues within Napier that we can assist with responding with. The Napier City Recovery Plan will also look at the Napier City Council specific actions. So where we can as a council support the community in terms of relief, projects, funding, and also advocacy. And in doing that, local engagement with stakeholders is really important. So we're already speaking with business sector groups, Business Hawke's Bay and others to try and really understand what's happening at the ground level. And importantly, also that we're not in this alone, that we are looking at partnerships with other organisations, including iwi, other local government organisations and business associations, so that we can work through this together, ensure that we're not duplicating, but really complementing what everyone will be doing to recover from the COVID-19. And to the left of that diagram, Hastings is obviously also doing the same thing for the Hastings district. And we are working, we want to work alongside them to ensure that as a region that we're having a consistent approach to recovery. And as mentioned before, tourism is a big part of that, and how can we look at recovery in the tourism sector, and Hawke's Bay Tourism is operating in that space, so that will be really important as we develop our recovery plan for Napier City. To the right of that diagram, just noting around the Napier infrastructure projects, so there's a lot of work being done looking at potential projects on the books that would be appropriate to have government funding to support those projects continuing to go ahead, and keeping local contractors engaged, is particularly where those projects may assist in the recovery itself. So we're already advocating in that space, both through the regional level, but also what is important for Napier and what we're trying to achieve. So that's sort of where the Napier City Recovery Plan will fit into the overall context of what we're doing as a region. And then if I just move down into the different stages of the Napier City Recovery Plan. So obviously the information is changing on a daily or sometimes hourly basis around what might happen and what that might look like. So we are going to approach it in a staged way. The first stage that we're focused on immediately is the recovery immediately post-lockdown. So what will things look like in Alert Level 3 for Napier, and how can we support businesses to continue in that space, acknowledging that there will have been this shutdown for 4 weeks. So we're really focused on that, and as Mayor Kirsten said, focused to get that out before the end of the lockdown period, so we can provide some clarity around what that might look like in Napier. But at the same time, we're also looking into the stages 2 and 3. So stage 2, the midterm recovery. So that's looking at the sort of 12 to 18 month time frame, which may still have travel restrictions, and which will really impact on Napier and how we've operated in the past. So really looking at how can we really help to recover the Napier economy for our community in that medium term, while those restrictions might still be in place. And then beyond that, looking at the longer term recovery in the 18 plus months. So we're still really focused on getting that done as promptly as possible as well, but wanting to ensure that we have good information. So that will come out a few weeks after the stage 1 initial recovery plan. In terms of our approach to actually developing the recovery plan, we've got 4 stages. So the first stage, and this is within each of those timeframes, we'll be repeating this process. The first one is, what will Napier look like in that timeframe? So really looking at the data that's coming out from different sources around the Napier economy, what sectors are impacted, where there might be employment issues, speaking with stakeholders around where they see the issues are for them to continue operating, to really get an idea of what will Napier look like in that time frame. And related to that also, what are the roadblocks or opportunities to achieving community wellbeing in that time frame? So based on what the restrictions might be, what the challenges are, trying to identify what the key issues are in the Napier context, which might be different from elsewhere in the country, really wanting to have that local focus in terms of what are the key factors getting in the way of recovery for Napier. Then from that, we can identify key objectives. So what are the areas of focus to assist in recovery for Napier? Trying to provide some real guidance around what are we trying to achieve, where can we focus our efforts? And from that, then we have the recovery initiatives. So we can assess different potential options against what's going to be most appropriate to help Napier through the post-COVID-19 environment. Underpinning all of that, even though there is a focus necessarily on the economic well-being of Napier, everything is interrelated. So we are also looking at the social welfare component and keeping in mind the environmental and cultural well-being as well, that all work together for the well-being of the Napier community. So when we're assessing those objectives and initiatives, we'll be keeping all of those in mind. So that's sort of a broad overview of how we're approaching it. As the Mayor said, there will be a website that goes up early next week that will have some information in terms of that immediate stage 1 recovery, really focused on encouraging everyone to make a plan, and those resources that are available will be on the website. That's a broad overview. Does anyone have any questions through the Mayor on that?
I can't see any hands raised, so it would appear not. Thank you very much for that, Catherine. And I'd just like to thank all the staff that have been involved in all the work we're doing around COVID-19, the incident management team who have been working tirelessly and long hours for both our immediate response and also moving into our recovery response. It really is much appreciated, and you're all doing a fantastic job. So thank you very much from myself, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of all the councillors when I say that. So are there any other announcements by management? No, that's good. Now, I did neglect to ask earlier if there were any minor matters not on the agenda.
Sorry, I just had a couple of questions. My hand was up. If I could ask those now, please, Mayor.
Good as gold.
Okay. Now, I appreciate we've got a 4-day holiday coming up, and we won't have the minutes of this meeting for some time, quite understandably. But I was just wondering, through you, Madam Mayor, if some of the documents that have been shared today, Natasha's welfare plan, Catherine, your own verbal reading report, your recovery plan, if those could be made available perhaps on our website, just to help reassure people over the weekend of the content of what we're discussing today, because it is quite comprehensive and reassuring approach, and it would be a pity if people had to wait until, after the long weekend, sort of get that reassuring word from us.
I'm sure we can arrange for that to happen, Maxine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Bogue. And did you have a second question, or?
Sorry, no, thanks.
No? Okay, thank you. Right, so yes, just checking in. Did anyone have any minor matters not on the agenda? Very good. Okay, so we will move into our agenda items, and we do have a rather full agenda today. Catching up after our committee meetings had to be cancelled earlier, in March. And our first agenda item is with regards to the Whakarire Revetment funding decision. So I would invite Council Officer John Kingsford to give us a quick presentation on this paper, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Kia ora koutou, morena everybody. That's quite a lengthy report with a number of attachments, so I'll do my best to summarise that as we go. I think it would be fair to say that this project has had a fairly rocky history. Private funding potentially eroded support in the early days, but hopefully the tides have turned and support is on the rise. So let's get into it. We are looking from this report to update Council on recent engagement undertaken in relation to the project. obtain approval to proceed with the project and confirm direction from council on the funding arrangements. As I've mentioned, this project has been around for some time, has gone through a resource consent process with appeals that resulted in a modified solution being agreed upon through that process. Subsequent to that, there was a consideration around how the project might be funded in line with the policy being implemented through the Coastal Hazards Strategy and consideration of public-private funding splits. That resulted in a recommendation to Council for a 97% public and 3% private funding split. Last report to Council, it was left on the table for council officers to consult with those residents of Whakarire Ave around that proposal. Initial consultation identified some resistance to that funding, and we've undertaken further consultation to understand that perhaps to a greater level and to perhaps address some of the concerns that may have arisen around the project not directly related to funding. The report does have quite a bit of background to the project that I will happy to take as read and really get into the consultation. I'm just scanning through the report here. It's hard without the paper copy to flick directly to it. So there is a consultation report attached as attachment A around the latest consultation. We did have a workshop with residents locally at the end of last year to discuss the matter. And we subsequently asked for feedback from residents on the current nature of the project. From that formal response to that consultation, we had 11 out of 14 properties respond, 10 support the project proceeding, 1 is against the project proceeding, and 3 did not respond. So that gives us a 71% of residents support the revetment proceeding. It's worth noting at this point that the original report put up on the agenda did inadvertently exclude feedback from 1 resident that has now been incorporated into the percentages and numbers that you see in the report in front of you in the amended report. So I'm just working through that now. Oh, sorry, lost my place. So that is about the support in principle for the project. Feedback was also sought on the nature of the targeted rate proposed with a 3% private contribution to the funding of the project. And as you'll see from the report, 50% of residents agree to the targeted rate or would accept the targeted rate. Obviously, that means that 50% don't agree to that. So that does present some, consideration required there of that balance. Due to the nature of engagement and the time taken, we have had to update the estimate of the project due to the different timeframes involved in potential delivery, and the project is now costed at 2.2 million. This is a combination of increase in construction costs, but also perhaps a change in the scope of that price to now include items such as landscaping. There's a cost in there for stormwater, dealing with private stormwater into the reserve, done by council as opposed to individual property owners, and recognition of the internal costs around project management and contract management. Moving on to risks, there is some risk associated with this. One respondent has responded through their barrister to reserve their position on the project. That is the resident who is in opposition to the project. So that needs to be recognised and considered at some point. So we are looking at options. Council have let this lie on the table to further consider the funding of the project, and ultimately, I guess, if funding can't be agreed upon, then there is a potential for the project not to proceed. So option A. Option B, proceed with the project, rescind the resolution to seek a private contribution, and therefore fund 100% from public funding. Proceed with the project and proceed with the additional 3% private contribution, but that 3% applied to the current estimate of 2.2 million, or proceed with the project and resolve to adjust the private contribution to 2.5% of the current construction estimate. So that option D is a recognition that the estimate has increased since the conversation with our residents started, and so in their minds they've been thinking about a specific dollar value that, if we applied the original 3%, would now be higher than that number in their minds, and that would perhaps put the project at risk of losing the support that we have for it. Our development of preferred option recommends the option D, to proceed with the project and resolve to adjust the private contribution to 2.5% of the current construction estimate. That's probably a reasonable summary of the project as it stands. Perhaps if we go to questions from there.
Great, thanks, John. And I would like to acknowledge all the work that you and your team have done on this particular project. I know it has been quite a long, drawn-out process, and it's great that we've actually reached a point where we do have some good support from the affected community members. So, Keith, I see that you have a question there.
John, just going down to the percentage of people, of the residents for and against it, in your 50%, it's included two that didn't respond and one that was inconclusive, doesn't it? That goes into bringing it up to 50% rather than being higher of those agreeing.
I'm just trying to interpret that question. I think there's a question in there. I believe that those that haven't responded have not been counted in as those that are in support. So the 50% is about confirmed support.
Yeah, there.
For the funding arrangement.
You did get my question. Thank you.
Any further questions? Annie.
Just on a, sorry.
Greg. No, that's right. You go, Greg. And then
sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. John, just for the public that are actually perhaps this doesn't affect them, or they feel it doesn't affect them. I mean, what's the implications of this work not going ahead for not only the residents in the avenue, but also the I guess the wider Napier population?
Thanks, Councillor Mawson. That's a really quite a very good question. The project was identified quite some time ago, at least 10 years ago, when studies were undertaken into erosion in and around West Shore, and it was identified that unchecked erosion could significantly affect that end of West Shore. So at the moment, our reserve is acting as a somewhat of a buffer to that erosion, but without some work, that buffer will be eroded away and would leave the private property there exposed to ongoing coastal erosion. The original application that was put forward for this work was a much more significant structure, and through the mediation process that was pulled back in scope. So it's kind of a balance of risk in that regard. So I think there is an option, as we've put in the paper, not to do the project, but that would be leaving the only management of erosion as the reserve being a buffer, and in time private property would be at risk, and it's a very long process to get the consent that we do have, and so for private property owners to have to perhaps consent any individual structures in front of their property would be quite difficult. So I do believe that it is the right thing to do, to proceed with the project, to manage that risk. Look, it is a shingle area based on a shingle spit, and without controlling erosion in that point does perhaps raise some very long-term risk around the nature of that shingle spit up into West Shore. There are other, control mechanisms in place around the entry into the inner harbour, but that does raise some long-term risk if we don't proceed and stabilise that end of the shingle spit.
Thank you, John.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. John, I suppose wanted to make a point, and that is, I know there was a little bit of unease in our regional partners when we originally came out with our public-private split on this particular piece of coastal protection work. Everyone would be aware we're working through the Coastal Hazard Joint Committee to further those sort of cell-by-cell responses. And I just wonder if you could make some comment as to why this one was different in the way that we assess the public-private split, just to give those partners some certainty that it's not a model that we're intending to overrun that committee with.
Wow, that's a great question. I'll do my best to answer that without rambling on, perhaps. So one of the key considerations when we looked at the private public funding split, and I guess this is probably one of the earlier projects to be considered in the coastal hazard strategy in that regard, was potential exacerbators in the nature of the erosion that's occurring in and around West Shore. And without going into the technical detail, the debate highlighted the potential for the port channel and capital dredging to be an exacerbator in that situation. Now, there's a lot of science on this that, depending on whose point of view you take with that scientific work, does I think that generally it was recognised that it is an exacerbator, but there is no mechanism to have them share in the funding of any solution. And so council saw that should be met by some basically public funding in recognition of that, and that the private property owners shouldn't be lumbered with some of that cost. As it turns out, we ended up with a 97-3 split, and I think that is a recognition that in principle there is benefit to the private property owners, and so in principle they should contribute. We're not here to debate the 97-3 again, but I think that's really where we landed, is a recognition that there were exacerbators, that there was no mechanism to contribute to funding, and this was where council landed in terms of what they felt was fair and reasonable.
Yeah, and I think it's also just fair to say as well that there was a lot of historical discussion with this particular piece of work that led through to the decision around that funding split as well, and that isn't going to be the case moving forward, because we start afresh with each new project.
Yeah, that's a good point to make there in closing. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Price?
Just from an approach from a family member who lives in that area, is there room for a buffer from where from the section where the section ends into the area that will be reserve? The suggestion that if there was a 3 to 5 metre buffer, perhaps the person against it would be more receptive towards it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point to raise, Councillor Price. Certainly, some of our consultation efforts post-council leaving the previous report on the table did look at how stormwater might be treated and concerns around the possibility of losing or some of the security around properties or having public right up against property boundaries. And while there was an agreement in principle to work up a landscape plan prior to that report, that was reiterated through our consultation process. So we have made a commitment in principle to those residents to co-workshop what that landscape plan might be and a commitment to a buffer zone. I wouldn't want to commit to measurements of 3 or 5 metres in that and perhaps predetermine the outcome of that, but there has been a commitment to a buffer zone worked into that landscaping plan as we work that up with residents. And it's probably worth noting that as mentioned earlier, we've allowed for a single solution for stormwater to pick up existing discharge points of private stormwater into the reserve to accommodate residents' concerns that were raised earlier on in our process.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. John, could I ask, with regards to some of the feedback, particularly clause 1.5, could you provide me with some detail around the choice of the term to litigate further and what any of the concerns, some detail around the concerns from that particular resident? I'm more interested in, first of all, checking that we have, in our opinion, recorded and done everything we think is reasonable and fair to engage with our community. And secondly, some sort of assessment around what is the potential risk associated with that litigation.
Do you, Madam Chair? So perhaps it's probably the resident that Keith has referred to around concerns about buffer zones. It's quite a large consideration, that one. That resident's responded through their barrister to reserve a position, and that was associated with concerns about stormwater, which I feel that we've addressed through the process and had addressed prior to receiving the follow-up correspondence from that barrister. And it also expressed concerns around the potential for public to get right up to the private public property boundaries and concerns around how that would impact on their property and the like. So in that regard, I feel that agreement to a buffer zone and co-designing the landscape plan addresses that as much as we can at this point in time. Previously, or previous approaches to the project was that the landscaping would be done post-project construction. However, the inclusion of that in our project estimate now allows us to run that process and I guess in parallel with the commencement of construction, so that we can pull that forward essentially. I'm not sure that really if there's any other risk than that specifically. There may be. I felt that we'd really confirmed those positions to the residents prior to receiving the communication through the barrister. I guess they're just reserving their right to make sure that it's perhaps not overlooked at some point. I can't see that happening, but that's their right and that's okay. We're happy to work with them and converse with them in any way they choose.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Has that fully answered your question, Councillor Tapani?
Thank you, John. That was great. I wanted some clarity around that, so that was perfect. And the other thing through you, if I might, Your Worship, was could you provide for me a little bit more information on local purpose reserve? That's a new term for me.
Local purpose reserve and as opposed to any, yeah, that I'm probably best to come back to you on that one. We'll get our Parks and Reserves expert to give you perhaps a better definition of that, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, John. That'd be great.
Do we have any?
Through the Mayor?
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Just an answer to your question, Councillor Tapani, about the consultation process. I think in our minds we provided ample opportunity for people's views to be heard, and on several occasions, and most people engaged with that process. And as you can see from the report, with 12 residents providing their written feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. That is a good point.
Thank you for that. Right, if there's no further questions, I will read out the officer's recommendation, as we don't have the benefit of our visual big screen that we normally have at our council meetings. And so the recommendation before us is that Council A note the change in scope of the project to now include stormwater, conveyance, landscaping and third-party supervision. B, resolve to proceed with the project. C, approve the updated project cost estimate that now includes additional items, including landscaping, storm conveyance and third-party supervision, and to fund the additional cost from loans. D, approve the private contribution to be held at the same amount as per the 2019-20 consultation, resulting in a change to the public-private split to 2.5% private, 97.5% public. And E, note that Council have committed to further consultation with residents of Whakarire Avenue to develop a landscaping plan, and that this will be undertaken as the project commences. Now, do I have somebody who would like to move the recommendation before us?
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani, and seconded by Councillor Simpson.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapani, would you like to talk to it?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to acknowledge, just building on the comments that came back from Natasha and John earlier, I just want to acknowledge the long and sustained effort that our staff have made with regards to working closely with these 14 properties. It is a complex issue, dividing the cost between the city as a collective and the needs of those 14 particular properties, but also the protection of that reserve and the ongoing climate change impacts. So I wanted to speak in favour and move this motion because I think it speaks to directly the level of work that our staff have put in with this community to try and progress this conversation in order to find a resolution for a very long-standing problem. And I fully support their work and look forward to progress going forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. Councillor Simpson.
No, I think Councillor Tapani took the words out of my mouth. I think it has been a long project. I think the report explains the processes and what will be a far better outcome for both the residents and occasional users of that environment. So again, just thanking the staff for their input and effort on that basis. And I think we'll end up with a really good outcome in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Did anyone else wish to talk to the recommendation? No, that being the case, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, maybe a raise of the hands. I think that looks unanimous to me. We will say against. I think that was a unanimous vote in favour. Thank you all. We will be, I think, working through various challenges within this environment as we work through the meeting. Moving on to our second agenda item, which is the Civic Precinct Project Steering Group. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that this particular project is a very exciting and important project for our city. It is looking at a huge revitalisation of a section of our CBD, and it's vital that we get it right and that we do all the planning required to ensure that we do get it right, which is, of course, why we need to have a really robust process and a steering group involved in this. So I would invite Richard Muneki to talk us through the paper, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item really acknowledges that the library, civic building and commercial development need to be treated as one now. It really requires a good look at the opportunities and the costs in an integrated manner to get the best overall outcome. So the idea of a steering group is envisaged to allow that kind of focus that's necessary to pull those things together on behalf of council, and then take it back through the council once there is that initial due diligence and consideration done at a more detailed level. And the first key idea there is to introduce the concept that this is one, and we need a master plan for the civic precinct in the first instance to make sense of that entire site and the components on it, and try and put them together in a way which is, financially, environmentally, socially sustainable and in line with the city vision and those sorts of things, to maximise the potential, basically, of what is a once-in-a-generation project for Napier. And the terms of reference for that steering group are attached. So with that, I'll just make some brief comments about each of the component parts. The library has gone through an extensive site selection process already. This is attached for you, and that has basically, ironically, led to where we started, back to where it was. But importantly, that process is also supported by a library strategy, and this will really help to guide the needs of a new library as the master plan develops. So, in other words, the library has to meet a modern library that is fit for Napier's needs, and not just put back what we had, because that's a dated product that doesn't meet the strategy as it currently is. So it's to make sure that the master plan actually accommodates the needs of a library in there. The civic accommodation project has actually had a long history and probably kicked off this whole process. That started with the idea of sprucing up the old civic building, and there was money allocated for that a long time ago. As part of doing that, it's important to make sure that you understand the seismic ratings of the building, and we have done the seismic investigations, and that process has led to the vacation of that building and going into our current accommodation in the three sites. So as part of that, while that concluded that the civic building was, beyond kind of financially acceptable repair, the library building has been examined in terms of costs of refurbishing the library building for the purposes of our civic accommodation. And again, that bodes well for the master planning exercise, because we can throw that work into the mix in terms of the master planning, and it's a lot of good work that's gone in there already. So So lastly, the commercial development opportunity that the council went through a special consultative procedure to establish on the old Civic building site. And I can report that negotiations have been ongoing with a hotel provider. However, the impact of COVID-19 on the landscape, the tourist landscape and the accommodation landscape is yet to be understood. But I think we can all conclude that it won't be as good as before COVID. And so I have a personally pessimistic view of whether a hotel development will be the development that actually emerges on that site. However, we are still in negotiations with the provider at this stage. Lastly, on a positive note, there are early indications from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Enterprise that there is central government support for the council city vision and the reinvigoration of the Civic precinct in particular. So that kind of, I'll leave that with you as the end of the introduction to the item.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions from councillors? No. Okay. So again, I'll read out the officer's recommendation. It's quite a lengthy one, so bear with me. A, receive and accept in principle the recommendation from the Library Site Project Steering Group to pursue the development of the library on the Station Street site. Excellent. Thank you. So B, endorse the formation of a Civic Precinct Steering Group. C, endorse the Civic Precinct Steering Group terms of reference. D, note that the Civic Precinct Steering Group will undertake comprehensive master planning for the Civic Precinct, including any important linkages beyond that site, keeping council informed ahead of specific recommendations to council on that master planning. Note that the Civic Precinct Steering Group will recommend key consultation steps to council for the project. Note the annual plan will include the preferred site for the library and that any feedback on this through the annual plan can be forwarded to the Civic Precinct Steering Group for consideration in the master plan development. And lastly, resolve that the time capsule and mural relating to the Civic building be housed in temporary storage prior to demolition of the old Civic site. Do I have a mover of the motion?
I'd like to move that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, and seconder.
Yep, happy for that.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. And would you like to talk to that, Deputy Mayor Brosnan?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Your Worship. So I think this is a really exciting motion to be putting in front of you all today to move this project forward in a really coordinated way. I think what's also exciting about this proposal is that we're bringing together all of the options and, dare I say it, some large opportunities in this space in our CBD to consider not only the library but our civic functions, our staff housing, the opportunity to get all of our teams back together in one place, as well as all the potential partnerships that sit around the space we're looking at. We have a lot of, our regional as well as central government agencies sitting in that same space, and there will be a lot of opportunity to converse with them through the development of this master plan, how we can make this space look for our communities moving forward. I wanted to speak in support specifically of the objectives of the working group. So the working group is going to develop a master program for the Civic Precinct, and that will bring together all of those components that I talked about back through to council for them to consider, along with the key stages in the process where we will go out to the community. I was very keen for us to see some commitment to a site selection for the library as part of signalling our work in this area. And I'm really glad to see that council has supported that, because there is, I think, a pretty unanimous feeling around the table that there was some good in-depth work done on potential other sites for the library, but that we have come back to the Station Street, the original site, and I think it's quite important to signal that to the community at this stage that we intend to stay there and bring the library back, and we want to do that in a coordinated way with all the other opportunities we have in that space. So we will work closely together on the development of this, and I expect to see it back in front of council regularly to talk about our progress and the consultation steps that we will go through. The last thing I wanted to note is that there are some really key stakeholders. We've got Friends of the Library, we've got the buses, we've got HBRC, we've got the MSD building. We've got a lot of key stakeholders in that space, and so that was built into the objectives of the working group, that those parties are engaged along the way and brought in at the relevant time. So thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move and support the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Brosnan. Councillor Mawson, did you wish to speak to the motion?
No, that's fine. Deputy Mayor Brosnan summarised everything. It's perfect.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? No, doesn't. Hayley? You're on mute.
There we go. Is that better? Just wanted to speak in support of the motion, and just saying, with the timing that's going on at the moment, there with the potential invigoration projects and everything that are potentially going to flow out of this COVID-19 issue, that this could fall like some of the steps, such as the demolition of the Civic building, could be a good project that we could use to reinvigorate the economy locally. So, speaking in support.
Thank you. Right. If there's no further speakers in support or against the motion, I will now put that. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your hand. Well, your hand's disappearing, Max, but I think it's up, isn't it? And against? So another unanimous decision. Thank you. Moving on to our third agenda item, which is the Marewa Shopping Centre transport safety improvements. So this is another project that's sort of been in the pipeline for quite some time, and staff have been working very hard on. So I would invite Robin Malley to talk us through the paper, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep.
It does seem a little bit odd bringing a project which is aimed at dealing with localised congestion at the moment. It turns out we don't actually seem to need roads at the moment. So, but certainly, as you say, this has been around for quite a long time, and certainly the problem's been around for a very long time. We wouldn't normally be bringing a transport project, a small area project to council, but obviously this is of really significant interest to not only all the business owners around there, but it's a facility used by a huge proportion of our population, actually, as a pass-through facility. So, we identified some real problems, and I don't think I probably need to describe them too much. We've got a huge amount going on in a fairly unrestricted space, and it's introducing a number of problems for pedestrians and cyclists particularly, but even just the number of, what we call fender benders. There's also probably a bi-weekly activity, and certainly the number of reported accidents, both injury and non-injury, that we have through our police and NZTA databases is very high for that area. We have looked at a number of schemes and we've socialised most of those, so it's been a fairly iterative process. And many of you will know that there has been a great deal of interest from certain parties who've, I guess, acted in all good faith, but has potentially introduced some misunderstandings or has added complications to the process, which have required quite a bit of team effort. So I'm certainly really glad to my team and the guys in design and projects for the efforts they've put in to resolve all of those. The last meeting we had with the public was primarily targeted at the shopkeepers and business owners along there. We had a really good turnout, and I think that possibly was one of your first appointments, Your Worship, as in your current role. And that really went very well. It was a great opportunity to actually explain not only what we were trying to achieve, which was fairly well known by that point, but certainly how we were proposing to resolve it and how we were going to deal with the conflicts. So that the option we've put in front of you today is sort of a third version iteration. It's a slightly unusual layout. What it does do, if we're on, page 87 of the agenda, there's a image which shows the plan. I'm not going to talk about all of the aspects of it, but it's basically a very long elongated roundabout. Enables every existing movement to go on, and it enables a few additional movements to go on. There are a few restrictions in that area at the moment. Feedback's been very good. Results of the modelling were very good. And so just kind of trying to put it in front of you now, and just to get a bit of an idea, and certainly your support for progressing this to the next phases, which are detailed design and certainly going out to the wider community, trying to explain what's happening. I guess in summary, there are delays that will occur. If you're just travelling straight through the area, you will now be interrupted one additional time each time through as you approach the elongated roundabout, but the turning traffic volumes aren't going to be so significant that you're likely to have to wait for any length of time there. It also means that if you spot a parking space and you see you want to go and get a pie, you can actually do that U-turn quite legally now, instead of doing it just in front of the chemist there. There's no loss of car parking spaces. I think there's one lost car parking space in the process. We got a sheltered cycleway, protected pedestrian crossings at either end, and a little bit of traffic calming on the approaches from Douglas MacLean, Wilding Avenue and Nuffield. I don't know if there's any further points anybody would like me to cover off. I have included traffic modelling output, which can be a little bit tedious to look at, so I'm happy to explain any of those parts if there are any questions.
Thank you for that, Robin. Based on this further plan, do we still have any significant objection to it from any key stakeholders?
No, Your Worship, not through anybody that's seen it now. The local businesses that have had a look at it, we've dealt with a couple of the organisations that look after, we've dealt with Blind and Low Vision and the Alzheimer's Society, and they're all comfortable with these arrangements as well. I think there was a lot of uncertainty for the shopkeepers. I think they were told that something similar was going to happen quite a few years ago. Certainly it's not a scheme that's ever been on the board's books since Mr. Kingsford or myself have been here. And there were some significant delays, and I think they're very worried about what that would do to their business while the construction was going on. We're certainly very keen to manage that as carefully as possible. Certainly there is no work going on to the car parking spaces or the forecourt associated with this that will require any sort of difficulty for those businesses. It's not going to actually stop anything trading for any period of time at all.
Great. I'll open up to other councillors. Yep, Councillor Bogue, followed by Councillor Crystal.
Yes, I thank you very much for all the work that's been done to come up with this design. Do you think, in the light of the fact that there are two quite sizable retail areas in that shopping centre that are currently vacant, and there could be more, hopefully not, but after the COVID, the dust has settled, do you think this will increase accessibility to those shops and make it easier for people to stop there and do their shopping, which is exactly what will be needed after the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there will be a small period of getting used to it. What people will have to do is probably be a little bit more conscious that they're going to go in and visit the shops. At the moment, people kind of crawl along hoping for a space and dive in last minute, and that's sort of one of the movements that's causing the problems. It will be an awful lot tidier, it'll be a lot neater, and there won't be those slightly chaotic moments. So we are certainly hoping that it'll be a more pleasant pedestrian environment, it'll be a more pleasant cycle environment. And that will hopefully give a little bit more vibrancy. There is also some discussion with our colleagues in city strategy about some potential re-landscaping of some of those areas. It is in part starting to look a little tired now, so it certainly may be somewhere that we see some investment in the actual fabric of the footpaths, the curb and channels, and the street lights and so on, again, which may assist.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crystal. You're on mute.
Unmute through you, Madam Mayor. Robin, I use this intersection quite a lot, especially the Georges Drive coming into Kennedy Road. And when you're heading towards town there, have they thought about putting a turning arrow into Georges Drive? Because that's where the traffic backs up quite a lot.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The NZTA, who look after that intersection, have got a programme to add right turns to, I think, all of the movements in that intersection. So it's a signalised upgrade. It has been hanging around in the wings a little bit over the last couple of years, but our understanding is it's intended to be installed next year. And our various bits of modelling have worked with each other to make sure that they're all going to continue to work well together.
Yes, because otherwise you'll end up with a backlog at that roundabout of people trying to turn.
Indeed,
yeah. Okay, cool.
Any further questions?
Yes, please, through you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say, I mean, I've lived in the Nelson Park ward, which is this sort of goes through there, and been through that intersection by Douglas McLean there for Marewa shops for many, many years. And there has been a lot of work done on there in the past. And just looking at this new setup, you've got the final brief. It actually looks really, really good. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you've obviously put into that. And I think it solves a lot of problems there. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Now, Councillor Tapani, followed by Councillor Wright, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Robin, I've got a couple of questions for you. The first is, when do you think we might be able to get more detail around the comms plan? I'm particularly interested in how we'll be informing road users of the impacts of this change along Kennedy Road, and how we'll be facilitating that impact for regular users, unless you're in a place to speak to it now.
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, the comms plan is certainly in its early stages, and we wanted to seek approval from council before going to that point. It is a major project, and as such, it will probably warrant its own webpage on the Have Your Say. It will be more of an informing rather than a requesting information, but it will be subject to the full works. I think we will also supplement that with signs saying major roadworks or major improvements planned here. Please check Napier City Council website. But there's something that we will work through with Natasha's team and develop up that programme.
Cool. Supplementary question, if I can, please, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
The second question I have for you, there's two others I have, Robin. The first is around what have we heard from our emergency services around this particular final layout and their impression of the impacts of the ability to get through that section, or whether or not they even use Kennedy Road. And the second question I have for you is around the pedestrian access from the Onekawa or the western side of Kennedy Road, enabling people to get across to the shopping centre, and what our thinking was around enabling people's access there. I know that was an area of concern for a number of our aged, disabled, etc., who use that area. So are you able to speak a little bit around our thinking in enabling pedestrian access to the shops from the other side of Kennedy Road, and if there are any complementary changes to the bus stop, for example?
Yep, certainly. Through you again, Madam Mayor. With regard to the emergency services, there are, I guess there's no additional risk been created. The space between the island, or rather the island and the curb, I guess, which is the narrowest section, the long section there, that'll still be enough space for somebody to pull across if they need to get out of the way of a fire engine or an ambulance. The greater concern to the emergency services tends to be speed humps. Likewise for buses, because I don't know if you've ever been sat on the back of a bus when it's gone over a speed hump, but it's pretty uncomfortable. And that's why we've avoided any such treatments on Kennedy Road itself. With regard to the pedestrians, we've certainly put more formal crossing facilities in place, and they are at either end of the block there. Obviously, there's the bus stop is at that sort of northeastern end of the area there, and there's certainly been a bit of compromise with that in the past few years. It's back, it's moved forwards. We've got a bus shelter that doesn't actually stand near the bus stop itself, and we've got a curb build out just by where the bus shelter is. So it is a bit of a mess, and that will certainly be resolved. The idea is to bring the bus stop and the shelter more in line and get that as close to that northern crossing point as we can. Likewise, there was some discussion about having a central crossing point. There's a couple of reasons why we didn't follow that through. One was that to then get into the shopping centre from the northern side, we'd probably lose 4 or 5 car parks, and that was certainly not welcomed by a lot of the traders there. And the other thing is, of course, the number of pedestrian journeys that actually generate from inside of that block, as opposed to coming in from the side roads or further afield, is just subject to those 7 houses that are there. So it's, the bulk of pedestrians coming from a few hundred metres away will actually be coming in at the nodes rather than the mid-block section. So that's where we concentrated those facilities. Thank you.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. My last question. Robin, as I read through the report, I'm conscious of the fact that when we start this work, it will involve an impact on the movement of traffic between our suburbs and our city. So people will look for routes to be able to still get to work without impacting on their time. That's normal. But it occurs to me that this work on Kennedy Road will divert some traffic out towards Taradale and Latham. And that there's existing sort of known issues at the Latham and Douglas McLean intersection, which runs parallel to the waterway and crosses over Latham right before the roundabout there. So in our current demands, even in off-peak times, there can be a queue which goes from the roundabout past the Douglas McLean intersection, and quite often I see vehicles sort of sitting there waiting for a courteous drivers to leave a gap to allow cross traffic. Doesn't always happen. So given that we are likely to be pushing more traffic onto those two arteries particularly, are there any strategies to help drivers be more considerate or more aware of the need to allow for cross traffic at that intersection, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we do have traffic control devices, so that's signs and markings that we can utilise to stop people queuing across those intersections. And certainly if that's something that's going to be exacerbated by the construction works, that's something we can look at implementing, whether that's keep clears or actual hatch markings. They should, all it generally takes is a reminder for drivers, and the removal of fear that somebody's going to nip into their space if they hang back. So hopefully they can be managed during the construction phase and likely to stay afterwards if they've proved useful. We are also working on some traffic calming for that section of Douglas MacLean between Kennedy and Latham. It is subject to a little bit of rat running and sort of inappropriate use through the day and later into the evenings as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Robin, if this recommendation goes through, as it is, I just wanted to talk about timing because your own comments are around how it's quite quiet now and could be for some time. So if we're looking at the timing, how quick can we get through to the detailed design being completed and the consultation, and will it be this side of Christmas?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and Mr. Kingsford may want to add something in a minute, but certainly we, with regard to the consultation, that will be something that we can work on straight away under our current arrangements. We've all got good communications and can get that programme into place. In terms of the detailed design, we are trying to keep both our internal resources and external agencies, design contractors, busy, aware that there's obviously been quite a drop-off in private work and likely to be a sustained drop-off. So some of those jobs will continue to be done. So the design work and the consultation work can commence. I guess there's a big question mark over when we're allowed back out to do these kinds of construction works. But certainly I would like to think that if we're in March, April, it would likely to be just after Christmas, I would anticipate.
Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, if I might add to that, I guess one of the considerations that we've become aware of as we move through some of the technical work associated with a piece of construction like this is that the technical side of things is probably the shorter time frame, and that we need to make sure we're allowing enough time for the consultation. What practices we might have had historically, I think there's a greater expectation for comms and engagement as we move into a project like this. So rather than kind of set a deadline for when construction might start, I think we probably need to get a feel for how consultation and engagement proceeds. As Robin's pointed out, it's more of an informed. This is a safety-driven project, so it's not going to be designed in a kind of a public process like that, and we've already worked through a number of options to try and come up with an optimal solution and work through with business owners. So it would be nice to think that we could start the project around Christmas, but I think also that's going, if depending on where the economy's at, we wouldn't want to start that before Christmas because that would ideally be a busy period for those shops. So we'll have to think very carefully as we move through and progress design and engagement when an appropriate low impact period might be. So we haven't really done that yet. We've kind of waited for this meeting of council to understand that timing. But I think that's something we can continue to talk about as we move forward and progress into detailed design and beyond.
Thank you, John. Are there any further questions? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. Robin, when you spoke originally, you said all of the existing traffic movements are retained. I can, however, see that the right-hand turn into Douglas MacLean from Kennedy has been removed in this proposal. And being that Douglas MacLean is one of those kind of arterial connector routes, have you modelled any flow-on effects of that? Is that going to have any issues?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the wider aspects, there was no significant knock-on effect. The right turn there is busy but not huge, and certainly there are with the state highway, which is supposed to be taking that sort of cross and through town traffic. It's, if somebody's needing to get in there, then they can either go through Wilding and then back down. So that's those sort of localised trips, i.e. the residents through there. There are some minor changes like that, but having looked at the catchments of those movements, they're actually pretty low.
Cool. I think from my perspective, the residents along Douglas MacLean, I know they have some issues with that being used as a connector route, possibly more than it should be. So they'll probably appreciate, I would suggest, a reduction in some movements off those main routes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I'll ask for the officer's recommendation to be popped up on the screen for everybody to read through and our community to see. Thank you, Adele. I won't read them out now that they are viewable to people, so I would like to invite someone to move the motion, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move the motion.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Councillor McGrath, thank you. And was that seconded by Councillor Bogue?
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor McGrath, would you like to talk to the motion?
Yes, I would. I support the motion. This has been a very dangerous intersection for a very long time. I've watched, when we talk about cyclists, the people I see cycling through there are kids going to and from school, and I just cringe at times. And one of my questions that I was going to ask is, yes, when could we start this work? But that has been answered. I've watched accidents happen there. I've cleaned up after accidents that have happened there, and this is really good progress for our council. And I like to hear from our officers that we are going to do and carry on with the engagement, and that it has been a priority to get that sorted. Yes, I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to build on what Councillor McGrath has said and what's in the motion itself and the recommendation, the intent of the project is to improve safety for road users, and this includes cyclists, pedestrians and vehicles. And I would like to thank and applaud the staff for all the incredible amount of work they've done to develop a plan that meets those concerns and also answers some of the more questionable or issues that have worried residents and some of the retail staff. In terms of the timing, at the moment, all those shops, except for, I assume, I don't know about the liquor store, but the pharmacy will all be closed, so we won't be able to do any kind of consultation on this with them until after the COVID restrictions are lifted. So we do have to take that into consideration. But like the Civic Precinct project, this is a project, the time is right for it. A lot of work has been done. It's the motive behind it all has been the safety of our people, and I'm hoping that it will be accepted. You can't please everybody, we all know that as councillors, but it will be accepted as the best possibility and having the highest opportunity to reduce the risks that exist with the present setup. So I'm totally behind this.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Councillor Brown.
Hi, I'd just like to speak in favour of the motion as well, and I particularly like the evolution of design, how we've gone from something that looked quite complicated to the start to a really simple and streamlined approach. So commend the team on the amended design, and it looks like you've gone through really good consultation so far, so very impressed.
Thank you. We've had 3 speak in support of the motion in front of us. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against it? No, that being the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Great. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, I'll just let you all know we are going to take a short break at 12. So we'll get through another item or 2 before then, but I thought we've probably got some people that would like a bit of a rest. So we'll work towards that break at 12 o'clock. And our next agenda item is the quarterly report for the 6 months ended 31st December 2019. And I will invite Caroline Thompson to present it to us, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're reporting a year-to-date operating surplus of $300,000, so that's for the 6 months ended 31st of December 2019. This is $1 million favourable to the budgeted deficit of $756,000. There are a number of favourable variances contributing to the surplus. They are higher than expected financial and development contributions revenue. Other revenue was higher by $960,000, and the business units mainly contributing to that were Kennedy Park, War Memorial, the property lease income, and income from the transfer station. Our labour costs were $750,000 below budget, and that's mainly due to a number of vacancies across council. Those favourable variances were partially offset by a number of unfavourable variances. Depreciation was above budget by $750,000, and that was due to the revaluation undertaken in 1819, impacting on an increased value of our asset base. Our other operating expenditure was above budget, and that was due to legal costs, some timing with in-house project invoicing, and unfunded costs relating to the aquarium business case. The capital expenditure for the 6 months stands at $12.2 million, but I'd also just like to point out that the full year capital budget and the annual plan is $85 million. So we're expecting that there will be a large number of budgets to be carried forward into 2021. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Caroline. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Bogue.
It's just a minor one, thank you, Caroline. And early on in the report page, I don't know, service performance snapshot, it mentions that we had a very good enrolment rates for particularly for young people, above the national average, which was great. In the local body elections, our enrolment rate was high. But I just wondered if we could include somewhere what the actual voter turnout was, because I think that was. I don't expect you to answer it just off the top of your head, but I think it also was above the national average, and I thought maybe it might be worth mentioning our voter turnout as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Any further questions of Caroline? No? I think it would be fair to say that our next quarterly report is going to look significantly different in light of COVID-19. So, but thank you to Caroline for the work she's done on this report, and obviously all the work that our finance team is currently undertaking with regards to our current position and our annual plan for next year. I'll ask for the recommendation to be popped up. Thank you very much. and pretty straightforward really to receive the quarterly report, which I'm happy to move from the chair. If I could have a seconder, please. Councillor Crystal, did I see you raise your hand? Lovely, thank you. I don't really have anything further to add from the comments that I've just made. Councillor Crystal, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Sorry.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Like you said, I think that's going to be a different story, but yeah, it was pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Just a little question. It says a quarterly report till the 31st of the 6 months to the 31st of December. Wouldn't a quarterly report be 3 months?
So we get quarterly reports for each quarter. So our next one will be for the 3 months to 31st of March. So you get a result for the quarter and you get a year-to-date result against plan as well.
Okay. No, I just thought it said in the motion, which I don't have in front of me, that it was for the 6 months. Have I got that wrong?
So it is the quarterly report, which covers off the last quarter and the whole 6 months as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Just being picky.
The teacher in you, Maxine. Is there anyone else who would like to talk to the motion in front of us? No, I will therefore put that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Carried. Right, moving on to agenda item 5, which is our district plan review, the Pandora industrial area rezoning options, which we have had some great background information and seminars provided to us by Catherine Rayburn. So I'd invite her now to talk us through the paper, please.
Sorry, Mayor. I'm going to be presenting the paper on behalf of Catherine, so hopefully I can do as good a job, or near to as good a job as Catherine would.
Welcome, Dean.
Thanks, and through you, Mayor. So the Pandora industrial area rezoning, as you've said, is part of our district plan review. It's a substantial policy document and a big project that's been going on behind the scenes, I guess, and with some engagement processes and touch points with stakeholders for quite a while now. And in terms of that, it presents an opportunity for council to get all of its policies, strategies and plans and align them so that the district plan actually tries to give effect to them. The Pandora industrial area rezoning was driven by the Whakarire Estuary and Coastal Edge Master Plan, and it sort of had a recommendation that a rezoning option be considered for the Pandora area. It wasn't location specific, it was quite open-ended in terms of the suggestion for rezoning, and behind the scenes had sort of an idea about improving water quality and the amenity of the area. Subsequent to that master plan being adopted by council, we also undertook a regional approach to looking at industrial development over the next 20, 30 years for the region and sub-region. And that regional industrial strategy has identified the Pandora area as being a very important area, strategic area, and has advantages for keeping industry in that particular location. So what that meant is we had a couple of strategy documents of council which had sort of different ambitions, and so the idea was that we'd look at this rezoning option and come back and present a number of options around what it could look like for council. Napier City Council is a large landowner in that particular area, so has a potential conflict of interest around a rezoning for that area. So the rezoning parts and the process around it was put out to an external consultant to come back and look at that independently. And as councillors are aware, we have had a seminar presented by that consultant and taking council through a number of, I guess they looked at the options around what the policy document said, what the statutory documents were indicating should go through, the process that should follow through the statutory documents, and developed a sort of a matrix type approach in terms of evaluating which rezoning option, if there was a rezoning option, to proceed with. So the paper touches on the options and how the decision was arrived at, and has recommended that council pursue option 4, which is the inclusion of a stormwater quality overlay and a relaxation of the existing mixed use zone for a parcel of land which is bound by Pandora Road, Humber Street and Thames Street. Council is now, or the paper recommends that council adopt option 4 and start another round of engagement with key stakeholders based around a specific proposal. Previously there has been engagement, but it was all based around sort of the options for what could happen in the area. So the paper is just recommending the fact that option 4 be adopted, and that we go out and commission further work and engagement with the stakeholders around a specific proposal. So I think that probably covers my things. So that would be, just the other thing I'd like to add, I guess, would be that if council adopts option 4, the idea being that once an option has got some sort of specific detail added to it, we'd come back and add that to the district plan, the draft district plan, when that gets notified as a general document. So this is a specific piece of work which will hopefully dovetail into the notification of the draft plan.
Thank you very much. I'll open up for questions, and I understand Councillor Tapane, you have some questions?
Yes, surprise, surprise, Your Worship. Thank you for that. Dean, thank you very much for stepping in and giving a report on the matter. I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, I want to acknowledge the diversity, the flexibility, the adaptability in which our team have used to approach our stakeholders in this area, and that overall I'm really pleased with, 1, the approach to the report in our businesses, and 2, how that's come back to us. But my specific question as I read through this report, and you might not be in a position to answer this, Dean, but I would like this message conveyed back to the report writers, and that is, I've got some significant concerns around the Māori engagement component of the report. It seems to indicate that there was some Māori engagement and consideration there. They approached only one Māori organisation, and no one turned up from that organisation, according to the report. So my expectation, and the message I would like you to reiterate back to the formation of this report, is that I expect a significant step up in the way that they look to engage with Māori around this particular area. These stormwater networks, some of them feed directly into the Ahuriri Reserve, and there is a legal and a cultural obligation upon us and the third party who wrote this report to be more diligent around how they engage with all of the parties interested in changes around the estuary. And so I just wanted to express clearly, it is my expectation that when we move forward, there'll be a significant step up in the way our third parties engage with our Māori communities around some of these things here. But from your perspective, Dean, would you be able to give me some confidence that even though the report's a little bit light around Māori engagement, could you give us some confidence around other areas and other engagement activities such as the district plan, which might be able to fill those gaps or provide our staff with confidence that we're still capturing relevant information, even if it's not particularly in this report?
So through you, Mayor, iwi engagement is an ongoing process for the whole of the district plan, and we are constantly trying to engage with iwi. We have had a difficulty, obviously, with this COVID situation, which has sort of negated our ability to get engagement with anybody, but including iwi. But going back a step, I guess there was a lot of separate engagement around the Ahuriri Edge master plan, and that involved iwi engagement. And so the desires of the Māori community for what would happen around the Ahuriri Edge was captured within that document. we will obviously, this particular one was sort of a specific report dealing with rezoning options and not getting into detail, but just looking at sort of high level options of what the rezoning may or may not look like. So it was a process that struggled to get a lot of feedback from all stakeholders, to be honest, and I'm not sure why that was, but the feedback that we did get was very useful. It was quite targeted in terms of the feedback from industry, community groups, recreational groups. There was a good diversity of feedback into that process. And it's only the first step in the rezoning process. As it gets a bit more specificity around what it actually means and what it actually looks like, then probably will be more interest involved in the rezoning proposal. So I guess the points noted and iwi engagement and involvement in planning processes is a work always in progress, and we're always looking to try and do things better.
Thank you. Did you?
Through you, Mia. Yes, I think that we have, from the outset through the Ahuriri Master Plan, particularly, and then through the Te Committee process, done our very best to be able to engage on all things to do with the Ahuriri estuary with mana whenua and iwi groups as much as we can. It has been a bit of a moving feast and different personalities entering the fray at different times in terms of that. It's really hard to keep everybody, through that whole discussion, which has been quite a long one. But I think that we have actually been engaging as much as we can on the estuary matters, including the industrial zone. Now, whether that's been seen as such, well, now that something specific comes through, I'm not sure. But I just wanted to put on the table that certainly from my angle, as trying to direct the project, I've been pretty satisfied with the engagement that's been happening, or certainly the attempts to do that.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Tapane, did you have another question?
Yes, please, Your Worship. Two questions which I'll chuck out on the table to any staff member who may be in a position to answer. The first is around, could I get a bit of clarity around the KiwiRail comments in the report and where we may be able to progress that conversation? And the second one was around, could you provide me with some comments on the impacts of containers? Page 29 of the report, page 133 of the minutes, where it talks about concerns over the environmental issues associated with container storage in our region. And given that the port is going to be going through some significant development, COVID aside, what is our thinking around mitigating those environmental impacts, considering the port will introduce more containers into Napier? So that's if you're able to answer that question, please.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, so the recommendation in the rezoning option is to add a stormwater overlay for that Pandora area. And that's the purpose of the stormwater overlay, is to support achieving good quality outcomes for the Ahuriri estuary and improving the quality of stormwater that's being discharged from that area. It's not in itself the grand solution, but it's another piece of the puzzle that will help achieve improved water quality for the Ahuriri estuary, and it would sort of supplement and enhance the council's stormwater bylaw that it's recently adopted. So the advantage of an overlay in the district plan would be to actually sort of get developers thinking at the time of site development in terms of how they're going to address stormwater and quality improvements. One of the disadvantages with the bylaw is it's sort of towards the end of the process that it kicks in and then goes into an operating process. So it's just trying to close the loop around from the consenting and discharges of stormwater through the bylaw, but actually getting people to think about it at the time of site development. So one of those big container storage depots already has a significant stormwater treatment from the port at the end of Thames Street. So in their view, they're achieving great outcomes. I'm not sure what the monitoring is delivering from that, but I guess it's a whole of picture of dealing with water as a whole life cycle for development. So the recommendation is around having an overlay, and the whole purpose of that is to improve the stormwater which is actually entering the Whakarire estuary. I'm not sure about the Kiwi Rail. I haven't found their comments. If you could refer me to that, if that's necessary.
If it's all right with you, Your Worship, I'll email those details because that information can come back offline. I don't think it's critical to the report, but I did want some detail.
Thank you.
And also happy to foreshadow the moving of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. Do we have any further questions? No. Okay, if we'll bring the recommendations up, please. And we have already had Councillor Tapani move the recommendation. Do we have someone to second the motion?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. And Councillor Tapani, would you like to talk to that?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm speaking in favour of the officer's recommendations. This activity has been developed over a significant period of time with a participatory approach towards discussion and engagement. I would like to commend this report and our staff particularly for their sustained and adaptive approaches used in engaging our businesses in this area of concern, and the invested interests from this, what is a long-serving part of our city and its history. So COVID-19 provided sudden impacts with significant change happening within our environment and a strong level of urgency. We get daily updates and every person is focused on addressing this challenge and finding solutions. This is not necessarily true of stormwater and climate change and the impacts that businesses have on our environment. We don't seem to have the same level of urgency. And so I'm looking forward to more great work from our staff in progressing these conversations with our businesses. And I'd like to make note of the professional and flexible engagement methods employed and the innovative approaches used to effectively engage with those businesses. While there is urgency around our environmental needs, reality dictates that a considered, well-planned pathway to achieving shared outcomes is essential. Acknowledgement to our staff for what have been further examples of their dynamic and adaptive approach when working with our community. I have confidence in the staff approach, their engagement and their continued relationship with these businesses, that they will help to shape the commitment of our businesses to adapt and enable their structures, their business practices and their services to provide better environmental outcomes, especially with regards to our stormwater overlay. So more of the same great work from our staff. What is clear from the information received over time is there is a strong desire from our businesses along the estuary to bring about good positive change. There is also a strong call from our businesses to ensure that we do that in a carefully managed, pragmatic way that enables their investment in our city's history to be measured against the need to adapt to changes coming forward. So keep up the great work, team. Keep that focus on with our businesses, and I just want to further commend your efforts to date. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. Deputy Mayor Brosnan, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Briefly, I think I'll just mention that the report from Strategy went through all of those options, I think, in a really great detail for us, and I'd just like to note that councillors received that in a workshop and worked through each of those options, and it really was with an open mind to coming up with the assessment criteria around which one of those options works best. I will note in that workshop that we did ask for a weighted comparison to come back of the scoring, and I just wonder Dean, I'm looking at you. I'm assuming that didn't change the recommendation that's come through in this paper, if that work was done. Sorry to weave a question into my speaking to it there.
Through you, Mayor. So my recollection of the workshop was that the consultant indicated the fact that they had considered waiting, but they didn't think it would actually impact on the outcome. But I didn't pick up on the fact that there was a feedback that you were waiting for on that. So I can follow up and see where that waiting comparison and what it would do. But as I say, my recollection from the meeting was it was discussed, and the consultant indicated it wouldn't have actually impacted on the outcome.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. I did note he was going to go away and do that, but I assume that's meant no change in the recommendations if he has gone and done that piece of work. So happy to support the recommendation. I think, the objectives are really clear in there around what we're trying to address, and it is a really important piece of the puzzle of the district plan formation, the draft district plan. So thank you for all your work.
Right. Did any other councillor wish to talk to the recommendation? No, that being the case, I will put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Against? Carried. Right. As promised, we will have a short break. It's just after 12, so if we could convene back at, we'll go for 15:15. That gives you time to go and make yourself a cup of tea and have a bit of a break. Or due to kick off at 15:15, so feel free to rejoin earlier.
12 first done?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.